The single most consequential geopolitical story unfolding this Wednesday is the ongoing U.S.-Israel war against Iran, now entering its 54th day. President Donald Trump announced Tuesday evening that the United States would extend the ceasefire indefinitely, but with a condition that is already proving deeply contentious. The U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports will remain firmly in place. Trump framed the extension in characteristically direct terms, stating he was holding off further military action at the request of Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who have urged Washington to allow time for Tehran's fractured government to unify around a diplomatic proposal. Based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured, Trump wrote on Truth Social, the United States would wait until Iran's leadership could come up with a unified proposal. The move puts diplomacy on life support, but not comfortably. Iran has flatly refused to negotiate while the naval blockade continues, with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi describing it as an act of war and a direct violation of the ceasefire terms. Advisors close to Iran's parliamentary leadership have warned the extension could be a maneuver to buy time for further military buildup rather than a genuine diplomatic opening. Vice President J.D. Vance was expected to lead a U.S. negotiating team for talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, a venue chosen for its relative neutrality and Islamabad's close ties with both Washington and Tehran, but no formal confirmation of Iranian participation has emerged. Pakistani security forces have visibly heightened their presence around diplomatic sites in the capital. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps added a stark warning to the mix on Wednesday, stating that oil production infrastructure across the entire Middle East could be targeted should any military strike be launched from Gulf nations' territory. The statement was directed at Gulf states quietly aligned with Washington, and it sent a ripple of unease through energy markets already unsettled by disrupted shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, a maritime flashpoint. If the diplomatic picture is murky, the maritime situation is dangerously concrete. Iran's IRGC announced the seizure of 2 vessels in the Strait of Hormuz on Wednesday, citing the ship's alleged disruption of order and safety in the critical waterway. The British military separately confirmed that a second ship came under attack in the early hours of Wednesday morning, shortly after Iran's paramilitary forces reported capturing the first. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes, remains severely constrained. The U.S. blockade of Iranian ports, maintained despite the ceasefire, has compounded disruptions. Energy analysts have warned repeatedly that prolonged restrictions on strait traffic could trigger significant spikes in global oil prices, feeding inflationary pressures already straining Western economies. The UAE is watching with particular anxiety. Trump confirmed Wednesday that a potential currency swap arrangement with Abu Dhabi was under consideration, and said Washington would back its Gulf ally if circumstances demanded it, a statement widely read as reassurance against any Iranian escalation targeting Emirati infrastructure. Far from the diplomatic maneuvering around Iran, the war in Ukraine grinds on with unrelenting ferocity. Ukrainian military sources reported Wednesday that Russian forces launched 143 drones against Ukrainian territory since the evening of April 20th, with Ukrainian air defenses intercepting 116 of them. The remaining 27 drones caused casualties and damage across multiple regions. In Sumy, a Russian drone strike hit a medical facility, damaged residential buildings, and injured at least 4 people. The Donetsk region bore the heaviest brunt of Russian ground and air activity, absorbing 1,954 attacks over the past 24 hours, damaging 30 civilian facilities, including an educational institution in Sloviansk, where 3 people were wounded. In the Kharkiv region's Bohodukhiv district, a mass Russian assault injured 11 civilians. Ukrainian forces struck back. Overnight, drones operated by the Security Service of Ukraine's Special Operations Center set fire to the Samara Line Production Dispatch Station in Russia's Samara region. Ukraine's defense forces also hit 3 ammunition depots and other logistics targets in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory and inside Russia itself during the preceding 48 hours. In a striking personal note underscoring the war's all-pervasive danger, Serhiy Beskresnov, an advisor to Ukraine's defense minister known by his call sign Flash, revealed Wednesday that Russian forces had launched 5 jet-powered drones, specifically targeting his family home in an apparent assassination attempt, leaving the building destroyed. The cumulative cost of over 4 years of total war is staggering. Ukrainian authorities put Russian military losses since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022 at approximately 1.32 million personnel. Western estimates of Russian killed and wounded range from 950,000 to over 1 million. Ukrainian military casualties, according to a late February estimate from a senior Western official, stand at between 250,000 and 300,000 killed and wounded. Russia still controls roughly 13% of Ukrainian territory, excluding Crimea and areas seized before 2022, a figure that has shifted only marginally over recent months. Fighting remains heaviest in the Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka sectors of Donetsk Oblast, where Ukrainian lines have come under sustained pressure. President Zelensky issued a pointed warning this week that any softening of Western sanctions against Russia would directly fuel Moscow's war capacity. He spoke after Ukraine carried out its latest strike on Russia's oil distribution network. Meanwhile, ceasefire negotiations, mediated by American envoys, including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, are expected to resume, though Zelensky expressed visible skepticism about their format, questioning why proposed meetings have been scheduled in Moscow rather than Kyiv. A nominal 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is in place in Lebanon, but it is holding only in the loosest sense. Lebanese authorities have raised the cumulative death toll from weeks of Israeli military operations to 2,454 people killed and 7,658 wounded. The destruction of infrastructure, bridges, roads, power stations, homes, has left over 1.2 million people displaced. On Wednesday, Israeli forces conducted fresh strikes in southern Lebanon, wounding civilians and damaging homes. Israel says the strikes are responses to rockets fired at its troops by Hezbollah. Hezbollah says its attacks are retaliations for ongoing Israeli shelling. Each side accuses the other of breaching the truce, and the cycle of tit-for-tat violence has continued uninterrupted. The toll on international peacekeepers has also deepened. French President Emmanuel Macron confirmed Wednesday that a second French soldier, one of 3 wounded in a Hezbollah attack on UNIFIL peacekeepers on April 18th, had died after being evacuated to France for treatment. That attack occurred while the peacekeepers were attempting to clear unexploded ordnance in a southern Lebanese village. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam said Tuesday that Beirut needs $587 million to address the conflict's ongoing humanitarian fallout. Lebanon is expected to request a 1-month extension of the ceasefire at upcoming ambassador-level talks hosted in Washington, D.C. The Lebanese government's primary objective for those talks, Salam stated, is to secure a full Israeli withdrawal from Lebanese territory, something Israel has thus far refused to commit to unconditionally. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu marked Israel's Independence Day on Tuesday by claiming that Israel had emerged strategically stronger from its combined campaigns against Iran and Hezbollah, arguing the operations had weakened Tehran's capabilities and opened new doors to regional alliances. While attention focuses on the Iran ceasefire and Lebanon's fragile truce, violence in the occupied West Bank continues on Wednesday with grim regularity. Israeli settlers killed 2 people, including a child, in attacks reported today. Vehicles and a home were set ablaze in a settler attack on the village of Beit Amrin, west of Nablus, in footage and images circulated by multiple outlets. UN figures document the broader pattern. Since the beginning of 2026, more than 2,500 Palestinians have been displaced in the West Bank, over 1,100 of them children. The displacement has been driven by a combination of settler violence, demolitions, evictions, and access restrictions. The UN's Human Rights Office also reported that more than 580 settler attacks resulting in casualties or property damage have occurred across over 190 Palestinian communities in 2026 alone. An earlier UN report covering the 12 months to October 2025 documented 1,132 incidents of settler violence resulting in casualties or property damage, an increase from 1,400 during the preceding period, and described accelerating unlawful settlement expansion across large parts of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, which has resulted in the forcible displacement of over 36,000 Palestinians. As Sudan's civil war enters what is now its 4th year, Wednesday brought fresh atrocities. A drone attack struck a market in the village of Adikon in West Darfur, near the vital Adre border crossing with Chad, killing 5 civilians and injuring 4 others. The attack is consistent with a devastating pattern that has seen both the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces deploy drones against civilian areas with increasing regularity. The humanitarian situation in Sudan is one of the worst on earth. More than 20 million people require urgent assistance, yet the 2026 Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan, which calls for $2.9 billion to fund relief operations, is just 16% funded, with only $465 million committed so far. Earlier this month, an attack on Al Jabalain Teaching Hospital in White Nile State killed 10 health workers, including the medical director, and injured 22 others. The World Health Organization has now verified more than 200 attacks on healthcare facilities since the conflict began, with over 2,000 people killed in those incidents. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, 13 verified attacks against health targets have killed 184 and injured nearly 300 others. The United Nations Secretary General's personal envoy for Sudan, Pekka Haavisto, is in Nairobi this week, meeting with Rapid Support Forces Commander General Mohammed Hamdan Hemedti, following earlier discussions with the head of the Transitional Sovereign Council, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The UN has described these engagements as exploratory, focused on identifying practical avenues for de-escalation and civilian protection. The Adre border crossing, a lifeline through which more than 118,000 metric tons of aid has flowed since 2024, remains open through the end of June after a recent agreement. Its continued operation is considered critical for the survival of millions in Darfur and parts of Kordofan. Wednesday, April 22, 2026, does not present a world moving toward peace. It presents a world managing several simultaneous conflicts at different stages of intensity, each with its own internal logic and each capable of sudden escalation. The US-Iran ceasefire is the most structurally precarious situation, a truce that both sides accuse the other of violating, with a naval blockade functioning as a slow-motion squeeze, and diplomacy that has yet to formally begin. The Strait of Hormuz, with vessels now being seized and attacked even during the ceasefire period, represents the most immediate risk of a dangerous military incident that could unravel the entire diplomatic effort. Ukraine's war has settled into an attritional slog that neither side appears close to winning. Russia controls a significant slice of Ukrainian territory, but gains ground only slowly. Ukraine has demonstrated the ability to strike deep into Russian territory, but cannot dislodge the occupation. Diplomatic efforts by the Trump administration remain ongoing, but lack visible momentum, and Zelensky's skepticism suggests Kyiv does not expect a favorable deal in the near term. Lebanon is caught between 2 ceasefires, one with Iran and one between Israel and Hezbollah, neither of which is holding cleanly, and both of which are fraying in ways that could interact dangerously. The death of a second French peacekeeper today is a reminder that international forces are operating in a genuinely lethal environment, and in Sudan and the West Bank, the world's attention is largely elsewhere as civilians continue to die. Sudan's war has crossed the 3-year mark with no end in sight and a humanitarian operation that is catastrophically underfunded. The West Bank faces a slow, grinding displacement crisis that the United Nations describes as systematic and accelerating. For now, the world watches and waits.